The following program is a production of the Barroom Network. It is intended for all audiences.
Doug Buffone.
This defense sucks. This is moronic.
John Buffone.
Your best plays are coming end arounds. There's a problem.
Doug was behind the microphone first. He never held back.
Very difficult to score when your offense is on the bench. When your defense is out there giving up 70, 80, 70, 64-yard drives.
Now it's his nephew, John. And there's no holding this Buffone back either.
An offensive-minded coach is running an offense that got 9 yards and a half. A beaten-up defense that isn't necessarily performing in key situations. And a quarterback that was expected to take a big step forward looks like an unsalvageable wreck.
I've had it. I want somebody to get kicked in the ass.
How many games do you rattle off all the teams running the ball 7 times and they win? I can't think of any.
I don't mind you getting beat. I got my ass whipped many times. But I took somebody down with me.
Because Bears fans wanted to believe in the worst way that Chicago had a stable, competitive franchise. And this is what we got.
It's Buffone 55, the John Buffone Show.
Hello and welcome to Buffone 55. We are back, we are mad, and we are ready to talk about the talking, traveling carnival show that we call the Chicago Bears. I'm John Buffone, and with me as always is my producer and co-host, Alyssa Barbieri. Alyssa, how are you doing today?
I'm about as well as you could expect me to be as a Bears fan. Just kind of was hoping to wake up from the nightmare after yesterday, but alas, here we are. The Andy Dalton era is upon us.
Yeah, we are going to dip into the Andy Dalton era that just kicked off yesterday. We're going to give our thoughts on that. But this is another one of those impromptu episodes that we've been doing. So we're going rogue today. No B55 segment, no guests. We're just going to sink our teeth into some Bears talk. So let's go ahead and bring on Aldo Gandia into the show. Aldo, normally I got to wake you up, but you look pretty alive there on the video. This is the first time we've done this on Buffone 55.
I took my nap today, so I'm fine. I'm ready to go.
You look well rested.
Thank you. I had my warm milk, and I'm ready to talk football. I'm actually much more optimistic about this move than I was yesterday, but I'm sure the two of you are not.
Yeah, I'm still a little bit on fire. But before we get into that talk, something that kind of just personifies the Bears organization throughout the years. And quite frankly, the reason we do this show, we've talked about it many times, is this show is dedicated to my Uncle Doug, who, if you are a Bears fan, I'm sure you heard his post-game rants, his post-game opinions on the Bears. And one of his quotes that he had on the radio, I think, just perfectly exemplifies what Bears fans feel right now. And we're going to play that clip for you. Go ahead.
When it's all said and done with, I think it's time to burn the forest down. But here's the problem. Here is a damn problem. Will it happen again? You burn it down. You get rid of everything. Does it happen again? And this is where the fault is. The fault is with the Bear organization. The Bear organization is a loser. They hire losers. And they try to put gravy on bad meat to make it taste better. You know, this is not easy for me to say, guys, because I put 14 years in that with that team. But I remember in 14 years, I can't tell you how many times I sat down after a practice, after a game with Butkus, and we talked about what was wrong with the team. We never went public with it. The coaches were terrible. The players they brought in terrible. But yet again, we kept thinking, oh boy, next year. Well, I just feel I got cheated. Butkus got cheated. Sears got cheated. Hell, they didn't even go through a playoffs. So what I'm saying to you is just the fact that the organization is the problem of all of this coming down. They go and they get bad players. They get Barber, Chester, Manu Maliuna, O'Meal, Sam Hurd, and this year Jared Allen, who couldn't play dead. They also get Mike Tice, and now it's down. I put color on that list.
So I don't think anyone would know better or have a better perspective on the Bears organization than him, not just because he's family to me, but that's a guy that played 14 years. Although you remember watching those years when he played, there was no next year. There was no hope. But for the players, they were always in that mindset that they could get something done. But is that not just an evergreen quote? That was clearly not recent. So that was obviously pertinent to that situation back in the 15 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever you want to say. That's kind of what the Bears organization is. It sells you next year. It tells you everything's going to be fine, and then it isn't. And so when I look at this team as it's constructed, I just feel like this roster was much better suited for a teardown and a rebuild as it is right now. There aren't very many movable pieces. They're in salary cap hell. They barely got underneath it after the 4 p.m. deadline. They didn't have a quarter. They have a quarterback, but they don't have a quarterback. The GM and the coach, they don't have a great resume. But let's throw things together with bubblegum and paper clips and see if we can squeeze out another 500 record and pick at number 20 again next year. And I don't want to hear about, Ryan Pace tried. What else is he supposed to do? Bears fans, he did everything he could. He threw everything in the kitchen sink to get Russell Wilson. What else do you want him to do? I am tired of hearing about people trying. I don't want a trying culture. I want a winning culture. And if you don't know what that backlash was about yesterday, then you're not paying attention. The anger was a culmination of signing Andy Dalton, yes, but also anger at the front office, anger at the franchise for never getting the quarterback position right, anger at not being able to trade for Russell Wilson, anger at aiming for mediocrity time after time after time, anger at lousy offenses every single year, anger at retaining a GM and a coach that can't get the right personnel on the field, anger at the owner, and the only thing people talk about is the 85 Bears. They're angry that we have to talk about something that happened 35 years ago every single year. So that's something that me and a lot of other Bears fans weren't even alive for. So yeah, I feel bad for Andy Dalton because he's getting ripped before he even gets into town. But this anger and this backlash and this reaction isn't just because of Andy Dalton. It's because everything else that comes with being a Bears fan and everything else that comes with the Bears organization. That's what the anger is from. I'll let you guys take it away, but Aldo, are you okay?
Safe? You know how bad my knees hurt right now?
I appreciate your commitment.
Alyssa, you follow that. I can't follow that.
Aldo was ducking. I was like getting my popcorn out and ready. I'm like, because John is like preaching to the choir here. I mean, like you said, it's just year after year after year, and we're just kind of sick of it. Like you said, I feel really bad for Andy Dalton for some of the fans that are like going to his Instagram or Twitter and leaving bad messages. Don't put that hate on him. It's not his fault. It's not his fault that the Bears quarterback situation has just been in complete shambles for the better part of the last few decades, or for most of the 101 years that this team has been in existence. It's just, I feel like, this is what was going to happen after watching that press conference, that horrible press conference where they couldn't reassure us of anything. Oh, we're going to get the quarterback situation right. We're going to figure it out. And even when the Russell Wilson talk kind of started, it was exciting as a Bears fan because I kind of had a feeling that was going to be the most exciting part of the offseason. Just even the idea that we could have a franchise quarterback, which is a concept foreign to John and me, but also like to my dad and to his dad. It's just kind of insane.
It's all Bears fans.
It's all Bears fans. And it was just nice to dream for once that maybe Pace was going to do something, but we should know better. I mean, his Mount Rushmore of quarterbacks, you have Mitchell Trubisky, Mike Glennon, Nick Foles, and now Andy Dalton is joining that. It's just, I don't know how they could wake up this morning and just kind of be okay with the state of this franchise. Like, how did George McCaskey and Ted Phillips wake up and are like, okay, 2021, let's go get it, right? Like, I don't see how they can be excited. Obviously, Bears fans are still, even more than 24 hours later, it still kind of hits fresh because I can't believe that we got to this point, but at the same time, I can believe, and that's just a sad thing.
Yeah, it's, when listening to Doug Buffone in that clip, what was that, like 25 years ago, John?
Or no, he's talking about Cutler, so it has to be within the last 10 years or so.
Oh, okay. So it was that recent.
But he's also talking about his playing career when it was the same damn thing.
Right. He's reflecting back over, back to the 60s when I saw him play at Wrigley Field. Somebody asked me yesterday, did you see the Bears play at Wrigley Field? And I go, yeah. So what of it? And then somebody followed up and said, or asked, did you see the Giants play at the Polo Grounds? I thought that was hilarious. But, it is true that what he said in the middle of that clip is that the Bears organization hires losers. And it hasn't been since Jim Finks, who is in the Hall of Fame. It hasn't been since Jim Finks that there has been somebody leading this organization who had a vision and knew how to execute on that vision. The first thing you do when you hire anybody for a position of leadership is you ask them, what's your vision for this team? What's your vision for this organization? What's your vision for this business? And they have to lay out a vision that's just going to inspire you. And so I would like to know what Ryan Pace's vision is, because it's all over the place. He's gotten stationary quarterbacks. He's gotten mobile quarterbacks. He's done this. He's done that. It's just all over the place. And whatever his vision is, clearly he has not executed it properly. The biggest decision that he had as the general manager of the Chicago Bears was to find the franchise quarterback. He traded up a slot and selected Mitchell Trubisky when Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes were available, and that was a huge, huge mistake. And we said it throughout the season here on Buffone 55 and our other programming. We were all rooting for Mitch because we knew that if it didn't work out for Mitch, we were going to be in hell. We were going to be in hell. And then I have to add this. Russell Wilson was a pipe dream to begin with. We just never had the assets. The report is that Pace met with John Schneider in Fargo, North Dakota during a pro day workout. They got into a room together. Pace made the offer, 3 first-round draft picks and 2 players. There's been some speculation as to who those 2 players are, but you got to believe that they were young defensive stars or any of the up-and-coming players. Kyle Fuller. But I don't think the Seahawks would have been interested in anybody with a large cap hit, given that they would have to be in holding that $35 million price tag on Wilson. So I'm not bemoaning Ryan Pace for saying, well, you're asking more than we can possibly give. I think that there is still a responsibility to the organization, the one that he's probably not going to be working at in a year or two. So, Trubisky was the answer. And if Trubisky didn't work out, and he didn't, we knew this was going to happen. We knew this was going to happen, and it stinks and it hurts.
But Aldo, what it comes down to is the anger and the reaction that people have. It's not because it's just Andy Dalton and everyone just hates Andy Dalton as a person. He's been an average, serviceable quarterback throughout his career, up and down. But the fact of the matter is he's going to be 34 in October. Mm-hmm. So I think what Bears fans are upset about is he's not going to be the franchise guy. So whenever you're sitting there at the end of the year saying, have we gotten the quarterback position right? No. And they say that the offseason is all about getting the quarterback position right. Well, you didn't trade for Deshaun Watson. You didn't trade for Russell Wilson. You weren't able to get Jameis Winston. You didn't trade for Derek Carr. You didn't do anything that. So what option was Andy Dalton? Because I can't imagine he was option 1A, 1B, 1C, or even down to D. I can't imagine that he was the guy they were honing in on at the end of the season that says, hey, whatever it takes, get Andy Dalton. So clearly that was not, they didn't do what they said they were going to do. And once again, I don't want to hear, well, what else are they supposed to do? What are they going to do? They're not going to unravel a banner in Soldier Field that says we tried 2021. That's not going to happen. You're not going to see, you're not going to get a decoder ring handed to you at the beginning of the year to say, hey, we tried real hard. I'm tired of trying. This is a professional football league. Get it done or get out. So they did not do it. As of right now, they have not done it. And all this is doing is probably giving another lame duck year. And we're going to see, and this is what I've talked about towards the end of the year last year. This is all I talked about. My biggest fear is that they're going to try to get the band back together. They're going to go, because they added a game next year, they're going to go 8-9 or 9-8 or wherever the hell they're going to go. They're going to be in the middle of the pack, maybe squeak into that expanded playoff that they were so lucky to be in this year. Get their asses kicked, and then they're picking at 19, 20, or 21 again, and they still don't have the quarterback position figured out. They got to get a new GM. They got to get a new head coach, and all they did was kick the can down the road for another year, and we're going to be talking about the same exact thing in 2022 in March. That's my fear. But I do want to go around and ask, and I'll start with Alyssa, and I know the bar is set very, very low, but is Andy Dalton an upgrade over what they had? And I'm talking about Nick Foles and Mitchell Trubisky. Is that a upgrade going into 2021?
Well, if you're talking about an upgrade, you're talking about making the Bears better, which I don't think that they got better bringing Andy Dalton in. I mean, we knew that Trubisky wasn't coming back. They both wanted to go their separate ways. We knew that. It's what's best, but Andy Dalton coming, I don't see him as being an upgrade, because now you have two aging below average quarterbacks on your roster that are taking up a combined $16 million in cap space next year. And, so that's why maybe you can't re-sign a Cordero Patterson or, extend Allen Robinson, or, why you might have had to cut Kyle Fuller, which I know that they're not going to do that. But I mean, I just don't see him as an upgrade because he doesn't make the team better.
Aldo.
I do see him as an upgrade, reluctantly so, because Mitchell Trubisky would have been the better quarterback. But if Matt Nagy wasn't going to make the necessary changes to suit Mitch's strengths, then, yeah, there's no way. The fact of the matter, though, is that Dalton is a better pocket passer than Mitch is. He is. There's just now. Will Mitch get better? I hope that he does, and I hope he has a long, very productive career in the NFL because he's a great guy. But right now, Dalton is the better of the two quarterbacks, and I think that's borne out by the fact that there isn't a general manager out there who is clamoring for Mitchell Trubisky. He's still a free agent as of 7:22 p.m. Central Time, and he probably will be for a few more days. It's his journey. This free agency could take as long as Cam Newton, who wasn't signed until about a month after free agency started. Mitch has some strengths, but it's not suitable for what Matt Nagy wants to do. And unfortunately, Matt Nagy has the ear of George McCaskey, and that's where we're at.
I've been saying this for months going into this, but I'm going to say it again. It's just ironic because I think if Mitch played for a different team and he just hit the free agent market, wouldn't that be one of the Bears' top targets? Doesn't he just seem like a guy the Bears would go after? Has shown sparks, has mobility. What are the three things that Matt Nagy said he wanted in a quarterback? It was mobility, decision making, and I don't even remember the other one. But so it's just leadership. Everyone loves Mitch, so it just seems like if Mitch was on a different team and hit free agency, that would just be a guy that the Bears would scoop up. That we can fix him. Let's get another retread. And so I'm just, and I think I speak for a lot of Bears fans when I say I'm just tired of seeing retreads brought to Chicago. That these veteran guys who are just the stopgap guy, and hopefully the defense can carry us. And this guy, if he doesn't make too many mistakes, the Bears could be okay. And we're talking about all the way back to, we can talk about Nick Foles. They just signed Andy Dalton. They did the same with Mike Glennon, who showed sparks, but no one really thought that he was going to be the franchise guy, and especially after they drafted Trubisky. You can go the whole way back to Chris Chandler, Cordell Stewart, like these guys that, showed signs on other teams and then they were let go, and the Bears are like, oh, I bet we can squeeze a year out of productivity out of these guys. And so I think the frustration really is born from the fact that you don't have a guy that you think is going to be there for the next 10 years. I mean, we know Dalton's not going to be there for the next 5 years, probably not even that. Maybe he's only there for a year. And so I think that it's unfortunate because Bears fans just say, give us someone who's going to stick around. Give us someone who's going to be here for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15 years. What a lot of franchise quarterbacks do. We don't need to be talking about the quarterback position every year. It's cyclical in Bears media that all we do is talk about the quarterback position. Since we've been doing this show, all we do is talk about the quarterback position. At least a big part of the show is dedicated to talking about, is this the right guy? Or who should they get? Or he's not playing up to what they thought. If they get a quarterback who actually can play well and he's a young guy and he's their franchise quarterback, I don't know what the hell we're going to talk about anymore, because this has been dominating our conversation forever. Since this show and every other show, it's always about the Bears quarterback woes. If they happen to just fall down and find a guy, we're going to be in trouble because we're not going to have much content. This might only be a 10-minute show, or we're going to have to figure out something. We're going to have to figure something else out. So, talking about where they're at right now, what Aldo, you said last night, you don't think they're done. You don't think that this is what their end game was. And before I ask you what you think that they might be doing, I'm going to say I want to believe that. I want to believe that this is not just what their plan is. But I'm going off of recent history and even later history. We can talk about the history of the franchise, or we can talk about the history of Ryan Pace as GM. Why should we trust them? Why should I think, oh, this is all one big ploy? Everyone else is playing checkers and Ryan Pace is playing chess. He's just got all these moving pieces and he knows exactly what he's gonna do. And he let Mitch go on purpose. He drafted him to be a bust on purpose, and he drafted Kevin White on purpose, and he drafted Leonard Floyd and let him go on purpose. Adam Shaheen out in Miami, he did that on purpose. All this is on purpose, and this is all going to be part of one big revelation, and this transcendental quarterback will be gifted to us. And Ryan Pace knew it all along, and it only took 6 years. I can't believe that. And I'm tired of trying to figure out this organization because I don't think there's anything to figure out. We see it. What you see is what you get. I think we give them too much credit sometimes as just like, oh, I wonder what's going on behind the scenes. You know what I think is going on behind the scenes? I think Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace have one of those wooden paddles with the rubber ball on it, and they're just going like this. And they got a propeller hat on. And that's just what they're doing for 15 hours a day. I think that's the equivalent of what's going on. So, Aldo, please explain to me why this is all one big anti-moon landing, grassy knoll situation where the Bears are going to get the best quarterback to ever play in the NFL.
Well, I can't because I don't trust them either, particularly Ryan Pace, who, as I said earlier, I don't think he's got a vision for the team. And whatever vision he might have, he hasn't executed it properly. But the reality is that there are 5 quarterbacks in this first round that I truly believe are capable of being really good in this league and maybe even franchise quarterback. This could be the best year for quarterbacks in the first round, because there's going to be 5 of them drafted in the first round, and I think all 5 of them have a really good chance. And the guy that's most ranked at number 5 of those 5 is one guy that I think should be number 3 because of his accuracy, because of his smarts, because of his leadership abilities, because he's just a really good quarterback. And people who watch the tape very closely all agree that Mac Jones is going to be a really good quarterback in the NFL. And people will say, well, he doesn't have the mobility. Well, neither does Tom Brady. Neither does a lot of other quarterbacks in the NFL. Mac Jones is going to be great. Trey Lance, who played at North Dakota State University, so he hasn't had a big-time portfolio against quality opponents and so forth. This guy's going to be great too. It's going to take him perhaps a little longer to get acclimated to the NFL. Maybe not. Maybe he'll be ready to come in right away and be like Russell Wilson was when he was drafted out of the 3rd round, out of Wisconsin in the 3rd round. And maybe he'll come in and supplant Andy Dalton. But any one of these 5 guys, no matter who they are, and then if for some reason they can't, again, Ryan Pace fails to trade to get one of those guys, because I truly believe all 5 of them will be chosen before the 20th pick. if that happens, there are some sleeper quarterbacks that should be available in day 2 and maybe even the beginning of day 3. And we're talking about guys like Kellen Mond, who a lot of people are starting to really love a lot. He was on Chris Sims' list, and people started looking at his tape. And John, you're a big fan of his. I'm a big fan of Jamie Newman, the guy who played at Wake Forest. And unfortunately, when he transferred over to Georgia, he decided to opt out, so he didn't have that season in SEC football. I think he's more of a day 3 guy, but the guy has got some physical strengths and a cannon for an arm. I fell in love with him when he was at Wake Forest. So he could be a sleeper guy, just like Dak Prescott was a sleeper guy. So there's an opportunity here to draft a quarterback who almost certainly will be a franchise quarterback in the first round, or some really good sleeper candidates in later rounds. So, but again, we're talking about Ryan Pace as the decision maker. So it is a bit concerning there. And my hope is that with John DeFilippo and with Matt Nagy obviously had a say about bringing Patrick Mahomes to Kansas City, that with this influence now in the war, so-called war room, Greg Gabriel hates it when I call it war room, their influence can better help us choose the right quarterback.
Alyssa, before I kick it to you, I understand that they still might be trying to make a move up in the draft, and that could be what this whole ploy was the whole time, to try to get into or maybe not after they struck out on Wilson, maybe they say we're going to try to get into the top 10 or we're going to try to get into the top 12. But at the same time, out of those 5 quarterbacks, statistically speaking, I mean, they all have good pedigrees, and I know a lot of guys at the bar room, especially the guys who are on Draft on Tap, feel like all 5 of them could potentially be really good quarterbacks. But if you look through the history and you look statistically speaking, at least 1 or 2 of those guys are going to bust, if not 3. And so that's just how it works in the NFL. Guys, sometimes the translation into the program game isn't there. So do you trust Ryan Pace to take a shot at the guys there's 5 quarterbacks to pick from, and he says, let's move up for this guy? Now, they probably aren't going to get Trevor Lawrence, so you're talking about the other 4, which is Trey Lance and Justin Fields and Zach Wilson and Mac Jones. So out of those 4, Ryan Pace is going to move up, and he says, that's my guy. That's who we're taking. I don't trust him. I don't have any reason to trust him. Look at the quarterback. Look at what he's done with the quarterback position in his tenure. I don't trust it. So that's another thing, that if you're going to move up and get a guy, I don't know if I want Ryan Pace picking a guy, because that guy's probably going to have to be here for at least 4 years out that rookie contract, and they got to try to make it work like they did with Trubisky. And guess what? If this guy that they draft is a bust, and they fire Nagy and they fire Pace at the end of the season, guess who gets stuck with that first-round quarterback that they spend a bunch of capital on? The next GM and the next head coach, and ownership says, make it work. We drafted him really high, much like whenever they forced Trubisky on Matt Nagy. They said, I know you didn't really have a hand in drafting this guy, but make it work. And that clearly did not work. So this could be another disaster coming down the pike. But I digress. That's just some of my reservations that I have about that. But Alyssa, do you think the Bears are done when it comes to the quarterback position? Do you think that they're really going to platoon it with Foles and Dalton, or is there another move coming?
Yeah, absolutely not. I mean, unless Ryan Pace is really that stupid to hitch his wagon to Andy Dalton and Nick Foles when he knows his job's on the line beyond this year. I mean, I'm on board with what Aldo was saying. I definitely think that they're going to make a move in the draft. I mean, a lot of people are like, well, they signed Andy Dalton, so maybe they don't have to make that move. They had that security. But that's for a GM that would be here for, the next few years. Ryan Pace doesn't have past this year. He might not even make it to the end of the year the way this is going to, if this pans out the way that I think we all think it's going to. So when your job is on the line, they have to make a splash. They weren't able to make the splash with Russell Wilson. So I think that their plan B was, if they couldn't land Wilson or Watson, that they were going to trade up in the draft and get one of those top 5 guys. And, Aldo, like you said, I think when you're describing Mac Jones, I think you described those 3 qualities that Matt Nagy's looking for in a quarterback. I'm just saying. So we shall see what happens with that. But I think they don't have a choice, given the situation that they are in, to go out and make a big move and move up to get one of those guys. And like you said, John, that means that we could be stuck with Pace and Nagy for the next few years, because then they could say, well, give us a couple couple of years to develop this guy, to see him out. Or even worse, they could part ways with Pace and Nagy. And then, like you said, the new regime is stuck with this quarterback who you probably had to shell out a first-round pick for in order to move up to the top 10 in order to take him in the first place. So, I mean, at this point, I don't think that they're done. I know that I think Ian Rappaport was mentioning that Gardner Minshew has been getting calls from teams and then he's definitely available. And Rappaport mentioned the Bears as one. And I'm like, oh, that would be so very Bears to go right back to the Jaguars and trade for another quarterback.
Yeah, they can't attach every quarterback rumor with the Bears now that they signed one. I get it before because the Bears were in it, but it's just like no matter what, the Bears are thrown in there. And so the only way, and I'm just talking, I'm bloviating at this point, but the only way that happens is if they're going to trade Nick Foles back to Jacksonville to mentor Trevor Lawrence, and then because of his contract, the Bears have to send back the 4th-round pick that they got for Foles, and they send it back to Jacksonville. Minshew comes to Chicago, and all of a sudden, basically, it was like a 1-year warranty on Nick Foles where they say, hey, we kind of want our money back. Can we exchange this? And they go ahead and they give the pick back. They give Foles back on a restructured contract to Jacksonville. Minshew comes over to Chicago. So then you got a platoon of Minshew and Dalton and whoever they draft. And then I don't even know what's going on anymore. Because if that's the case, like what? Why? What's going on? And so talking about last night, we talked about if the Bears are going to try to move up and maybe not spend as much in the package as possible, we talked about who might be that quarterback that kind of falls to 13, 14 even, because every once in a while you see these slides, and it hasn't always been great, but we've seen it happen with Aaron Rodgers, but we've also seen it happen with Brady Quinn when we saw it happen with Johnny Manziel, and we've seen it there's some bad examples there as well. So we're talking about the one guy that might slip, and Trey Lance's name was brought up just because he hasn't played really this year. It was at North Dakota, and there's just there's a lot of question marks there. He might have the most bustability, if I'm going to make up a word. Would you? And I'll go to both of you, but I'll start with Aldo. Would you feel comfortable if Trey Lance is there at 13 or 14, and then the Bears trade, they swap first-round picks, and then maybe they send a second-rounder or even or next year's first-rounder to move up 7 spots to get Trey Lance? Would you feel comfortable with that?
I would very, very much feel comfortable with that. And again, I don't know if he's ready to start week 1, but he certainly has that talent that every NFL coach right now is craving. He's got the giant arm. He's got the ability to throw the ball accurately. He's got great skills running the football. He's got all of the tools. What it's going to take is John DeFilippo and Trey moving in together and living together, much like Jim Dooley did back in 1969 when I was going to Wrigley Field to watch the Chicago Bears. And Dooley, then the head coach of Chicago Bears, lived with Bobby Douglas and taught him the playbook and cram-coursed him so that he could go out there.
That worked out.
It didn't work out, but for a long time, Bobby Douglas did hold the rushing record for quarterbacks until, who was it, Michael Vick or somebody came along and beat him.
Yeah, he got the rushing record as a quarterback.
Yeah, accuracy wasn't Bobby's forte. So, but it is for Trey. Trey can throw the ball well. Processing is something that he has to improve on. But I definitely would trade up 7 spots. And trading up 7 spots, what does that mean? That means that probably a 3rd rounder, maybe 2 3rd rounders, perhaps a 2nd rounder, a 3rd rounder.
It might go up though. There could be a number of teams trying to trade up to get. If you see Trey Lance that's falling to 13 or 14, you're going to have more than just the Bears thinking, "Hey, let's go get this guy. He's still there."
That is the danger. And I see Alyssa nodding in agreement that is the danger. There's a lot of teams are out there looking for a quarterback, and so that's going to make it a tough market, no doubt.
Would you feel okay with that, Alyssa?
Everyone knows that the Bear is in the market for a quarterback too. So I'm with Aldo. I would definitely trade up 7 spots to take Trey Lance. I mean, they need to draft somebody this year. I mean, how many times has Ryan Pace drafted a quarterback since he's been here? once. So they definitely need to make the move. I would be comfortable with it. There would obviously be in the back of my mind, I'd be fearful that Pace would, again, like if he zooms in on Lance, is like, that's my guy. Of course, in the back of my mind, I'm going to be a little nervous that, oh my gosh, is he going to draft the Mitchell Trubisky from this year's draft? Like, that's obviously in the back of my mind because, like Aldo was saying, the processing issues, which, we're kind of getting a little flashbacks to Mitch here. So, I mean, there are some parts of it that, make me nervous naturally because Ryan Pace is in charge of the quarterback position yet again, which was the reason why so many Bears fans just wanted them to clean house this year so that we wouldn't have to go through this. It's going to feel like last year, but maybe worse, and then and then you just clean house at the end of next year. So we've wasted a year, except for maybe we have a better draft pick to get a quarterback. I mean, I definitely would trade up. They need to take a quarterback. And and like we know, Pace needs to take a quarterback. He needs to take another swing at it in order to save his job. But at least this time, he has Matt Nagy in his ear, John DeFilippo, Bill Lazor. They can collaborate. That's that word that they love to use so much. So, I mean, if Trey Lance was there, I would definitely move up and get him.
And that Alyssa hits on something big there is that when management went to management, when Pace and Nagy went to McCaskey and said, in order to fix this, we got to get rid of Mitch. We didn't hit on Mitch. Well, then George said, well, thank you for your honest assessment. Pack your bags and get the hell out of Halas Hall, because you guys came to me and said this was, well, not you guys, but you, Ryan Pace, came to me and said Mitch was the solution. And I bought into that. And I paid Mike Glennon a bunch of money just so that he could be your decoy so that you could move up and select this guy. And then on top of that, you had me pay all this money for Robert Quinn when Leonard Floyd is over in Los Angeles sacking 10, 15 guys. He's got more sacks than Mack and Quinn put together. So pack up your bags, and I'm going to start all over, and I'm going to let the new guy handle this mess, try to get us a quarterback, and try to build this team around a new personnel. So Alyssa hits it out of the park there. That's another problem with this organization is that they don't know how to rebuild. And again, they're facing chaos and urgency in order to fill that quarterback position as opposed to just naturally building out of it. If they would have drafted Jalen Hurts last year in the second round, like I said, then would there be this panic going on? There wouldn't be, but they don't know how to build this quarterback position. It's like on their resume, proficient at effing up the quarterback position. You're hired. So,
yeah.
That's where we're at.
It is where we're at. And if they were, I guess they went to Trey Lance's pro day. I'm guessing that's where they didn't watch him too much because they were trying to do a backdoor deal to get Russell Wilson in North Dakota. So I don't know how many eyes were actually on Trey Lance at his pro day whenever they're trying to trade for Russell Wilson. Clearly they were really invested in Trey Lance. But I think you're right because Alyssa, you hit on a good points there. The one being, Bears fans, I think, are so frustrated again because it almost feels like next year's over before it starts. Where it's almost like you look at this team and you look at the makeup of it and you see Andy Dalton on a 1-year deal and you just look at and you kind of overlook the roster and you're like, this team's not going to be any better than it was last year. I don't look at this current roster and be like, yeah, this is going to be leaps and bounds better than the 2020 version. I don't see that. I honestly don't. So I think that's a big deterrent for Bears fans. That's why they're angry. And also, there's no validity to this, but there's a lot of people talking on Twitter about how they're saying or they're predicting that, I bet McCaskey said that Pace wasn't allowed to trade future picks and he had to go fix the quarterback position without trading future picks. Number one, I think that's completely false given the fact that we heard of reports of what they actually offered. And two, if you're the owner telling your GM, hey, don't trade any future picks, you're already assuming he's gonna screw it up and you're gonna fire him after the year anyway. So don't screw up our future when we pick your replacement. Don't trade our draft pick. So I don't buy that at all. But it's going back to the original question. If they can trade up for Trey Lance, there are some questions there. There are some of the same things that we may have saw with Trubisky. Not a lot of starts under his belt. Obviously did not play this year. Although you hit on the decision making or the processing, maybe that needs to be tweaked a little bit. Do we really, really trust them to develop that? Because they haven't been able to develop anybody. Look at some of the biggest players. Kevin White had injuries, and that career got derailed, and that's very unfortunate. But obviously that didn't work out. They weren't able to develop Mitchell Trubisky into what they wanted and what they thought. Obviously, Ryan Pace loved him. He never developed into what they thought he was going to be. They weren't able to develop Adam Shaheen. Injured a lot, but goes out to Miami and has some moderate production there. I'm not saying he's a superstar, but he did sign a new contract with him. He impressed him enough to get a new deal. Leonard Floyd, same thing. They weren't able to develop him into the guy they thought they were going to be. They let him go, and now all of a sudden he fit right into LA. So I don't have first of all, I don't have trust for them picking the right guy. I don't have trust in them developing that guy if he's not already, game ready. Like if there's not a guy who's not ready on day one, I don't trust this staff to develop him into something that can play in a year or so. So there's a lot of questions here. And I think that perhaps Alyssa hit on something when she said, yeah, they probably will trade up because that might give them more job security, where it says you can't get rid of us yet. We just drafted this guy. He's on the cusp of greatness. You have to give us at least another year to see what he turns into. And then that's the ultimate get out of jail free card. Draft the guy, mortgage everything, move up into the top 10, draft a young guy, sit him for a couple games, let Andy Dalton get 7, 8, 9 starts, then throw him in at the end of the year and say, whoa, you can't pull the plug on this yet. We're just getting started with this kid. Dalton's gone. We're going to be able to start this new kid in 2022. You can't. We're just getting this thing started. And all of a sudden, Matt Nagy, Ryan Pace back in 2022, especially if they don't make the playoffs, you want to see a meltdown. This Dalton was nothing. The reaction to that is nothing. If they bring those two guys back next year and they maybe just squeak into the playoffs or they don't make the playoffs, yeah, you wait to see what the reaction is going to be. One more thing. Oh, go ahead, Aldo.
I just want to say I said this at the end of last night's show, and Danny Shimon said, "What are you trying to do? Really piss off Chicago fans and start the next Chicago fire?" But I said, there is no guarantee that this is a do or die year for Pace and Nagy. So I don't know, John. I hear what you're saying. People are going to be pissed off, but if they get into the playoffs with an 8-7 record, or missed the playoffs with an 8-7 record, and they've got this young quarterback on the bench, it saw some action, looked promising, and so forth, I got a feeling that George McCaskey is going to put his arm around Ryan and say, I love you like a son. You're going to be here for as long as I have a say on that. So maybe Virginia has to fire George or something. I just don't know for sure that this is a doom or get it done or doom year for those two guys. I know both of you guys are rolling your eyes. So it's nice.
But that's the problem. That's the problem is that it's not if it's not a do or die year, that is what's wrong with McCaskey and Phillips. It should be after everything that's happened, especially the last 2 years. I don't care if you made the playoffs 2 of the last 3 years. You got booted in the first round. You managed 16 points, and then you didn't score a touchdown in the final seconds of the game. Like, that's not going to get you anywhere. And if they can't see that they need to move on, which clearly they couldn't because they decided to keep him around another year, that's the very problem with this franchise. And until they figure that out, until they get the right people in charge, replace Phillips, McCaskey needs some help. And until they get that help, we're going to be stuck in the same endless cycle of mediocrity that, they're okay with because they're getting paid.
Yeah, they fell ass backwards into a playoff spot that was just created this year. So when I keep hearing about, they made the playoffs 2 out of the 3 years, if this past season would have been the same guidelines and the same rules as 2019, the Bears don't make the playoffs. But they had to expand the playoff field, and then the Bears go ahead and they get that fun little playoff game, which, don't get me wrong, I love Bears playoff football, but they did not belong in that game. They were not on the same level. They were just clearly the inferior team, and that's what's so frustrating about it is that we're aiming at mediocrity. Get into the playoffs. Go 500 or maybe just above 500, and everything is going to be okay. I'm just so tired of the Bears being run, and I've used this reference before, but the Bears are run like a family diner, where it's just like, whoa, I can't get rid of him. He may be an awful cook, but that's my brother. Or, oh, she may be a terrible, terrible hostess or waitress, but come on, that's my cousin. We have a good relationship. I can't get rid of them. Oh, and then it's just like with the Bears, like, oh, we can't get rid of Ryan. He's just a nice guy. And Matt Nagy, oh, man, we just love our conversations with Matt. We can't, but the Halas Hall wouldn't be the same without those two. I can't imagine coming in and not having my morning conversation with Ryan and Matt. And so be damned what's on the football field. Let's just make sure that you have someone nice to have a conversation with. And so I don't care about that culture. I could give, I'll rein myself in. I do not care what their personalities are. I don't care how nice they are. I don't care that the players love the culture there, because we keep hearing about how the Bears have the best culture and they're the culture that teams strive for. What culture is that? The fact that you're really not held accountable? The culture that you can get by with being mediocre? The culture that I'm a player's coach and guys love being here. Fine. It's a fun culture. It's a trying culture. They try real hard and the guys, react real well. It's not a winning culture. And I don't care about anything else other than that. I don't care how nice someone is. I don't care about anything else other than, can you manufacture wins? And if you can't, get the hell out and let somebody in there that can. But the Bears are incapable of doing that, because much like you heard in that snippet on the top of the show, the Bears hire losers and they stick with losers. So they need a culture shift. Change the culture, George. This ain't working. It hasn't worked for 35 years. Mm-hmm. Fix it. Before we head to a break, I think we at least owe our friend Mitchell Trubisky one last segment, one last conversation, because it's quite possible that our time of talking about Mitchell Trubisky, although we're still talking about quarterbacks that played for the Bears 25 years ago, so I'm sure we'll bring up Mitch Trubisky. And as long as Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy are there, I'm sure we'll bring up Mitch Trubisky. But before, this might be the last conversation we have about Mitch Trubisky before he signs with another team and he's officially completely out of the Bears atmosphere. So let's go around. Aldo, what's your final farewell statement and thought around Mitchell Trubisky?
Can you hear me okay? There was a little bit of echo there for a second. Everything's fine? Okay. Mitch Trubisky, I think one of the things that will always haunt him was his play against the Green Bay Packers. He was sacked 22 times in the 7 games he played against the Green Bay Packers. 22 times he was sacked, threw 6 interceptions, 7 touchdowns, and had a completion percentage of 62%. If he could have turned that around, if he could have mastered beating the Green Bay Packers, he might still be the quarterback for these Chicago Bears. And clearly there were other problems, and the poor guy, he didn't ask to be picked number 2. He didn't ask to get, for Ryan Pace to be traded up. He didn't ask to have his first year of coaching Dow Loggins as his offensive coordinator and so forth. It's almost a replay of what happened with Jay Cutler. Now, Jay Cutler was a totally different animal, but my point is that the Bears never gave Cutler the resources to really succeed. It wasn't until his latter years that it was a somewhat average offensive line. It wasn't until the latter years where he had offensive weapons like Martellus Bennett and Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffrey and Matt Forte. Those were great offensive weapons, but unfortunately he was starting to break down with the injuries and so forth because of years of being physically molested by opponents. And so it's the same thing with Mitchell Trubisky. There was no vision to groom him and bring him along. As soon as you drafted him, you should have also hired you should have, prior to drafting him, you should have had your head coach in place who would have been, who would have agreed. This is the guy. Matt Nagy clearly didn't think he was the guy. He said I can work with him. I'm pretty sure I can make him a quarterback. Well, he was wrong. But, Matt Nagy's heart wasn't into it, clearly, so I just wish the guy success elsewhere. I think there's a chance that he could really have a very productive NFL career. He could be one of those quarterbacks that we've seen happen throughout the history in the NFL, that in his 7th, 8th year, all of a sudden things start clicking for him and so forth. And so that's what I'm hoping for him. But I don't want him to come back to Chicago and beat the Bears, because as much as I hate what happened to him, I still don't want that kind of retribution.
Alyssa, what do you think?
Well, Mitchell Trubisky's biggest fault was always being taken before Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson. And I think, especially when we saw what they were able to do in their first full years as starters, you had to hold, Trubisky up to them. And obviously seeing, he hasn't been perfect. But when people kind of label him with bust, I don't necessarily agree with that, because again, you look at his record as a starter, and unfortunately that he was able to get his team to the playoffs a couple times there. So, I mean, with Mitch, no hard feelings, like Aldo was saying. I think that he will do well going to another team. I think he's currently looking, I think Ian Rappaport was saying, looking for a place that fits his skill set. So somewhere like maybe San Francisco or maybe even Denver, I think would be a good fit for him. But I still remember the preseason, his rookie year, and just how exciting it was, that first game against the Broncos. And we're like, oh my gosh, maybe do we have our franchise quarterback, silly us forever thinking that. And, obviously things didn't really pan out the way that we would have wanted to. And you can point to, Trubisky's own faults, but also to Matt Nagy. And, you could say that Nagy really didn't give him a fair shake. He wasn't the worst. And kind of going off what Aldo was saying, I do kind of compare it to what the Jay Cutler thing, where hopefully down the line, Jay Cutler is a little bit more appreciated or not as hated as he was when he was on the Bears. So hopefully down the line, Bears fans will get to that point with Trubisky, because I don't think there's any hard feelings, kind of like with the Andy Dalton situation. There's no hard feelings about him, Mitchell, the person. It was Mitchell, the player, right? He just wasn't the guy. Ryan Pace messed up. That's something that's going to haunt him for the remainder of his tenure as Bears GM, which will probably be one more season. But, aside from that, I wish Mitchell the best. I think that a change of scenery will be really good for him. So I guess we're closing the book on the Trubisky era. There we go.
For now.
Crazy.
For now.
I don't see him coming back.
No, I'll keep it relatively brief. This kid didn't have a chance really when I look over it, because you're drafted by the Bears, who notoriously have bad quarterbacks, by John Fox as your head coach, who I guess didn't even realize that they were going to take Mitchell Trubisky. Your rookie year is basically a throwaway year where you didn't really progress much at all. And then you come in, and Matt Nagy is supposed to be this, guru who's supposed to be able to develop guys. And he wasn't able to develop him into what he wanted. Matt Nagy wanted Mitch Trubisky to be a certain kind of quarterback, and Mitch Trubisky was unable to be that kind of quarterback. And so you throw everything in there, and, Mitch did have his limitations. He still has his limitations, but he certainly was not helped out by a lot. The coaching staff didn't help. The philosophy didn't help. The pressure of being taken ahead of Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson clearly doesn't help. And so he needs to go get a fresh start. And I said earlier in the year, and actually middle of the year, I didn't see him coming back for a number of reasons. I don't think Chicago wanted him back if Matt Nagy was going to be around. I don't think Mitch should want to be back, because you got to find a coach that can tailor things around his skill set. You look at guys like Mike Vrabel, who was able to do this with Tannehill and some other, and you look at other organizations, even like Pittsburgh, who's able to, whoever's in there, they can kind of craft a game plan around. And so I was never on board with Mitch Trubisky, and you can go back and look at my tweet from the day after the draft where I said I woke up and I had a nightmare that Mitchell Trubisky is my starting quarterback, and that's how I felt about it when he was drafted. But I obviously wanted him to succeed because this is a guy that they took very, very high in the draft. You knew the Bears' immediate and long-term future was hitched to this guy, and you wanted to see him succeed. And for a number of reasons, partly on him, partly on the players around him, partly on the coaches around him, it just didn't work. And it's just another one of those Chicago Bear quarterback tragedies that we know about. We know about Rex Grossman, we know about Cade McNown, and we know about the slew of other guys that have come and gone, and it never really clicked for whatever reason. I don't know if there is a curse or what's going on, but it just did not work with Mitchell Trubisky. And hopefully he can go to a guy. And Alyssa, I think you said San Francisco. I think that's a very interesting fit. I think that Shanahan would probably figure out what he does best and get the most out of him if they decide to move off Jimmy G or even have Mitch Trubisky in the quarterback room. I think there's a number of places that he could go. They said New Orleans was a sleeper team for that. I don't see how he goes there with Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston there, but it's a possibility that he might just want to get that 1 year pedigree like Teddy Bridgewater did, and then Jameis Winston did, sit a year in New Orleans and all of a sudden you'll be a starter somewhere. And so I hope that he finds a place that is suited for him. I wish him the best. Everyone loves his personality. He won the Media Good Guy Award. I mean, he won the MVP, the Nickelodeon Most Valuable Player in the playoff game. Not many people can say they got that. So as much as I ripped Trubisky and as much as I was disappointed in Mitch, and I still hold on to those feelings, I want him to succeed somewhere else because we know that he's not a jerk. We know that he's not going to, just rip the Bears because I think that he has a certain level of class. And so I wish him the best. And if we are, I don't think we're closing the Trubisky era here. We're just going to close the fact that he's not going to be playing in Chicago anymore. We're going to listen. We're still talking about Cade McNown. We're still talking about Rex Grossman. We're still talking about all these guys. We're going to talk about Mitch Trubisky till the end of time. It's just his time as an active player in Chicago has ended. But we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk some other non-quarterback issues that are going to be the Bears are going to have to address moving forward. They re-signed Jermaine Ifedi. What does that mean for the offensive line? We'll hit on some of that stuff right after the break. You're listening to Buffone 55 right here on the Barroom Network.
Want to win this signed Tim Anderson jersey? Here are the rules. 1. Follow us on Twitter at SouthBurbHitmen. 2. Retweet the contest post that's pinned on our page. 3. Tune into the premiere episode on March 22nd at 7:30 p.m. Central Time on the Barroom Network and be present for the drawing. That's it, and good luck.
Hello, Bears fans. If you've learned anything about me over my 6 years drafting for Chicago, it's that I need help, especially with my first-round picks. There was Kevin White and Leonard Floyd. And then my biggest investment, Mitch Trubisky. And I know you won't let me forget about Adam Shaheen in round 2. But those mistakes are a thing of the past because now I watch Draft on Tap.
Good choice, Ryan. Draft on Tap features Danny Shimon and Neil Stopchinski, 2 outstanding draft prospect evaluators. This season, they are totally focused on the Chicago Bears' needs and prospects that fit their team. Additionally, their guest list will include some of the most prominent names in scouting. So Ryan, bro, thanks for doing what thousands of others are going to start doing. Watching Draft on Tap with Danny Shimon and Neil Stopchinski, only on the Barroom Network. We can all use a little bit of help, right, Ryan?
Welcome back to Buffone 55 here on the Barroom Network. John Buffone alongside Aldo Gandia and Alyssa Barbieri. All right, we got all of that quarterback talk out of our system, and I'm sure that's going to be brought up time and time again. But let's talk about some of the other things that are happening with the Bears. They go out and they re-sign offensive lineman Jermaine Ifedi. What do you guys think this could potentially mean for the offensive line? He showed some promise at right tackle at the end of the season. They originally brought him in to play guard, showed some spark in guard early on, and then the injuries took effect, and everyone was getting moved around, and eventually he ended the season at right tackle, where they may have had their best formula of the offensive line that they could find throughout the entire year down that home stretch. What do you think this means as far as the future of the offensive line? Because we knew they were letting go of Bobby Massey. They were going to they needed somebody to step in and play right tackle. I don't think this would affect whether or not they're going to target a tackle in the draft, but is this just a way to shore things up? Alyssa, I'll start with you.
Yeah, no, I think it was a good move on the Bears' part. I think we expected it, bringing Ifedi back, because, like you said, down the stretch, and when he moved to right tackle, which was a position he played in Seattle a lot, he found success there. So I think that it's definitely a way to shore up the offensive line. We know that we're set with the interior. Tackle's always been the concern and the issue, and I don't think that obviously re-signing Ifedi is going to affect them drafting a tackle next month. I still think that's the plan, but you do bring in Ifedi who can kind of shore up that line and provide some insurance there. And obviously we don't know what's going to happen with Charles Leno. They could go out and they can draft a tackle to maybe develop behind him while still having Jermaine Ifedi there manning the right side of the line. So I think it was a good move overall. Because offensive line, for as much as we've talked about the quarterback position, the offensive line is a big concern as well, which is kind of the quarterback situation's overshadowed that. So I think that this is one of those moves it's a small move, but I think that it's an important move, moving forward into this season. I still think that they go tackle in the draft.
Yeah, I think that the signing of Ifedi could be a sign that the Bears are going to try to move up in the draft. And so they wanted to have a veteran at that tackle position because they may not be able to address an offensive lineman in the draft until the middle rounds, because they might be trading the 20th pick and the second round pick to move up to draft one of those top quarterbacks. I think that's what it says to me, that is a possibility. I think, when the general manager puts his plans down, he's got contingency plans.
Most GMs.
That's right.
Maybe not this one.
I gotta believe that Pace is thinking about potentially moving up, and that he's not going to go into the season with Dalton and Foles. So that he's going to try to draft a quarterback, and so that's what that says to me. Now, what does that mean for the line as a whole? Depth is critical for this position. Ifedi can be an barely adequate right tackle, just like, and I know Chubbs is going to kill me. Chubbs 82 just hates Charles Leno and hates the entire offense. He hates Sam Mustipher. He hates everyone in the offensive line. I don't. I think that when you compare them with other offensive lines in the NFL, they rank right up there in the middle. They really, really do. I mean, we stare at, Leno getting beat once or twice a game, and we're ready to, throw the towel in on him. But Charles Leno shows up every week. He is an adequate left tackle. He's not a premier left tackle. There are very, very few, and the ones that are out there, like Trent Williams, cost an arm, a leg, a Halas Hall, and more. So the offensive line is not going to be one of the best offensive lines in the NFL next season, but they could be one of the top 12. And if there's a dedication to the run game, and there's a dedication to get rid of the ball quickly, and they get offensive weapons, guys that can do stuff. We're going to get Tariq Cohen back, and Tariq Cohen got off to a great start in 2020 before that injury. Maybe we're going to see the old Tariq back, who can do stuff after he's got the ball in his hands, and hopefully A-Rob will be back, and hopefully Darnell Mooney improves. And so what I'm saying is that sometimes it's just not all on the offensive line. You need the supplementary players who can make things happen, make things quick, and take that pressure off the offensive line so they're not blocking for more than 2.5 seconds. So I have some hope that the offensive line is going to be good. And then the other key thing is Juan Castillo, second year, going to have a true OTAs, true training camp to work with these guys. So they could get better. And I do believe that Sam Mustipher is going to be a quality center in this league. Let's remember, he was an undrafted free agent. He was not nobody thought he was going to be playing in the NFL. He comes into the NFL. He gains the respect of his players in meetings. His name comes up, and both players from both the offense and defense spontaneously burst into applause because of how he stepped into that center position and he took control. He did a better job at calling out plays because he's such a smart player. He did a better job than the veteran Cody Whitehair and a better job than James Daniels, and that was his natural position coming out of college. But apparently Daniels has had an adjustment problem in the NFL handling that responsibility. He a lot of times players reportedly were saying, say it louder. He just didn't have the confidence. So hopefully with Daniels moving to the right side, Cody Whitehair at left, Sam Mustipher with a full training camp and his knowledge and his improving strength, he's going to be a quality offensive lineman. And then you potentially have Bars as that swing guy to come in and replace any of those guys. I think the offensive line, particularly from the middle, it could be one of the stronger ones, at least in the NFC North. With the Packers losing Corey Linsley, their center, they're facing some big trouble. I was surprised that they let him go and they instead invested the money into the running back, Aaron Jones, is it? Mm-hmm. So that's my take on the offensive line. I'm hopeful.
We were just 24 hours removed from the Bears were getting Russell Wilson and Trent Williams. You guys remember that? that was a fun series. And then we ended up with Andy Dalton and Jermaine Ifedi. But and it was funny because Adam Schefter tweeted out today that Trent Williams had interest from the Chiefs and the Bears, but the Chiefs signed somebody else, and the Bears decided to sign Andy Dalton and Jermaine Ifedi. And I quote tweeted, I'm like, this probably isn't supposed to come off as an insult, but it kind of sounds like you're insulting. The Bears opted to sign Andy Dalton and Jermaine Ifedi rather than Trent Williams. But to your point, Aldo, I think that we thought at one point last year that this offensive line was beyond repair and they needed a complete overhaul. Looking at some of the pieces they have, they're young. They have a young group of guys in there. Mustipher at center, and then Daniels and Whitehair at guard. And then, say what you want to say about Leno, but he's a middle of the road left tackle in a league where it's hard to find good left tackles. And then you bring Fetty at right tackle, and he can be serviceable, average. So still, I think they probably try to get one in the draft somewhere to try to solidify that. And I love the fact that Alex Bars can step in and be that swing guy. He can be where you need him because you need depth on that line. We saw that last year that things fell apart real quick. So I kind of like the prospects of the line. I think it's much better than what we thought it was going to be going into 2021. Is it a strength? I wouldn't go that far, but is it a complete and utter weakness? No, I think that they're going to have ups and downs, but I think they're going to be a serviceable group. Before we move on, just one quick note that just as an NFC North note, perennial Pro Bowl cornerback Patrick Peterson signs a 1-year deal with the Vikings. So he's coming in to the NFC North now, another big name coming in to face the Bears twice a year for whenever Andy Dalton's throwing laser beams over down the line to whoever it is. Hopefully it's Allen Robinson, but it might just be Darnell Mooney and then the island of misfit receivers again going up and playing for the Bears. So there's just a little quick note there that just happened within the hour. But let's talk about the defense a little bit. And we thought perhaps maybe the Bears were going to have to move off some of these big names if they were going to create cap space. We were talking about if they were going to get Russell Wilson, how are they going to do it? And they still I don't know how they got under the cap today, but they were over the cap before the 4 p.m. deadline and didn't have to cut Akeem Hicks, didn't have to cut Kyle Fuller. I don't know if they extended some of these guys or maybe they kicked the can down the road. So next year was supposed to be they were supposed to have some breathing room with the salary cap. I hope they didn't sacrifice that for what they did this year. But my thought process on this was, and I said this from the beginning, that this team was set up much better for tear down and rebuild than they are to try to make it work in 2021. And if you're going to try to get rid of some players on the defense like Akeem Hicks or Kyle Fuller or trade Eddie Jackson or whatever the thought process was, you're tearing apart the strength of your team, hoping that Andy Dalton can get it done, or hoping that this offense that might be without Allen Robinson can get it done. So do you guys see a possibility? And now I don't know what they need to clear a bunch of cap space for now, other than if they are going to sign another free agent, or they are going to try to make a trade for somebody, or they are going to try to make some kind of move. Wouldn't it be unwise to tear down the best part of your team, which is the defense, to create salary cap for an offense that isn't going to be intimidating, or no one's going to be afraid of this offense going into 2021, and they're probably going to be middle of the road at best. I'm saying that's what they're probably shooting for. So isn't tearing down the defense, if you're trying to win in 2021, the wrong move, Alyssa?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it goes back to, what we were talking about, and this year should have been the rebuild. When you get rid of Pace and Nagy, that's when you can start dealing those pieces away and starting to rebuild. But right now, if this is the year where where it's all win, you're going out to win, like you said, trading away pieces or getting rid of pieces of the strength of your team, that's going to get you wins when you should be losing otherwise. Because how many wins can we give credit to the defense for doing that? Right. So, I mean, it doesn't make sense if you're a win now team to start dealing pieces away. I don't know how they were able to get under the salary cap. Like you said, they probably were a lot of restructuring going on. There's some extensions there. Probably there hasn't been any word of maybe Jimmy Graham getting released or any of that. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what exactly happened, because like you said, there was some cushion in the cap next year, and now that's kind of like gone. And especially when you look at what they did with Khalil Mack's contract, where his cap hit's going to be about half that it would have been this year, but then next year it's going to be like north of 30 million. And it's just kind of, they're getting themselves in trouble. Or Ryan Pace it feels like he's kind of pushing it off possibly to the next guy, because
he'll be gone.
It seems like he's in a win now mode with the way he's doing things like that, or going after a quarterback. So, I mean, we'll see what he does there. But I mean, I'm curious to see what they were able to do to get under the cap before 4 p.m. Eastern time. So, I mean, at this point, I feel like we would have heard if, Fuller was traded or released, maybe they extended him to kind of spread that cap hit out over. But like you said, it doesn't make sense for this team that is in a win now mode to start dealing pieces away of the strength of their team.
Yeah, the only way you're going to win with Andy Dalton as your quarterback is you've got to have a strong running game. You've got to have receivers, playmakers who can do things after they get the ball in their hands. And you need an outstanding defense. You need a 2018 defense. And so that the hope is that Sean Desai is going to bring back that Vic Fangio defense that allowed the Bears to get, 30-some sacks and lead the NFL in sacks, because there's good coverage in the back end. There's lots of creative, innovative disguises that's going to fool quarterbacks, and they're going to have to hold the ball longer. And Khalil Mack and Robert Quinn and Akeem Hicks and those guys are going to demolish quarterbacks, disrupt passes, create turnovers, and so forth. That's incredibly important. And so, just like I said, that perhaps the biggest offseason acquisition last year was Juan Castillo, because he was going to get more out of the offensive line, and I was sort of correct. Sean Desai is kind of the key guy, one of the key guys, because he's got to return this defense back to the Vic Fangio style defense that we had. It's the only way we're going to win, because whether Andy Dalton is better or not better than Mitch Trubisky, it's pretty close, right? And so the only way you're going to win with that guy is to get that defense back. And so I'm hopeful that they are not going to I'm hopeful that Kyle Fuller is going to remain. There's an issue there with his contract. Let's remember that with Kyle Fuller, when the last time he was up for a contract, him and his agent were stubborn. The Bears had to put the tag on him and had to match the Packers offer. So he may not be easily going to extend his contract unless he gets a big deal left, because at his age, this will probably be his last big contract. And so he wants that security. And remember also that, you got Roquan, you got a lot of issues on this defense regarding signing. So that's all got to work out. And just, I want to say something that Chubbs made the comment that he believes that the salary cap is phony. It's really not phony. I mean, yes, there are tons and tons of tricks that these guys can play to create cap space and so forth. But ultimately, the Bears have less money to work with than other teams. I mean, that's the reality. And so while they can free up certain money, those teams that already have $50-60 million of available cap space now, they can do the same thing. And so when guys are looking for big fat contracts, they're not gonna call the Chicago Bears. Trent Williams is not a Chicago Bear now because the Bears could no way afford him, and the Bears would have loved to have him at left tackle protecting slowpoke Andy Dalton. So
yeah. I agree, and let's not forget they're going to get Eddie Goldman back next year. That's going to be a big addition. You hope that Sean Desai can change things around schematically to get more out of that defense. Because like you said, they're going to have to rely on the defense again. And hopefully they have a good – I mean, I love David Montgomery. I think that he can be a superstar in this league. So I think that if they run the ball and they play defense, yeah, I mean, this is what their philosophy has been forever. And they just have to be able to – that's what they have to be able to do well. And is Matt Nagy going to allow that, or is he going to say, hey, Bill, get your guy, we're going to toss it around 45, 50 times a game, let's see what we can do? Or are they going to just slow it down? But I also want to talk, they signed Deion Bush to a 1-year deal, and it makes me think they every year whenever they bring in just the guy, because before they signed Clinton Dix, they thought, okay, is Deion Bush going to be the starter? And then before they brought in Gibson, they're like, is Deion Bush going to be the starter? Well, now they haven't signed another safety. Is this the year Deion Bush becomes a starter at safety? And he does have some familiarity with Sean Desai, obviously. So is he going to maybe try to fit him into his scheme better? Or do you see them going out and signing some other veteran to a 1-year deal, Alyssa?
No, I definitely see them going out and getting a veteran. I would like them to re-sign Tashawn Gibson because I think that he did an outstanding job last year with Eddie Jackson. And, I think that, he's comfortable with this defense and with the personnel and alongside Eddie. So I'd like to kind of see that another year. And I'd actually really want to see Gibson in Desai's Fangio defense as well. And I think that they could get him at an affordable price too, which obviously with the salary cap, they had heading into free agency, they had Eddie Jackson was the only safety under contract. So I mean, re-signing Bush and, Sherrick McManus, possibly DeAndre Houston Carson, like those are moves they need to make because they just don't have depth at safety. So I do think that perhaps that they're going to try to get Tashawn Gibson back, or maybe they're eyeing it in the draft, even though we know we need to go offense in the draft. But I mean, I think it would be a smart move if you're looking to win now as well. And because you're not going to use your top pick on a safety to bring Gibson back and obviously re-sign some of the guys you already have that have experience and familiarity with this. So, I mean, I think that they're going to kind of try to just re-sign everybody.
Yeah, I was actually looking at the available free agents at safety prior to the show, and I'm totally with Alyssa. I would love to see Gibson re-signed. I think, for the better part of the season, he was playing the safety position much better than his counterpart, Eddie Jackson. And I think that with Desai now scheming things and bringing back that Fangio style, that he could be as Gibson could be as an effective teammate to Eddie Jackson as Adrian Amos is. And by the way, Adrian Amos, why are you laughing at us for signing Andy Dalton? But
who isn't laughing at us?
Yeah, everyone's laughing.
There was a story out of Pittsburgh today talking about the Bears fans and how angry they are. In Pittsburgh, 93.7 The Fan in Pittsburgh ran a story today about how Bears fans reacted to the Andy Dalton news. That's how bad it is. Whenever other markets can report on your sadness, that's pretty bad.
Yep.
No, you want to know what's worse is Browns fans laughing at us.
Yeah,
That's right.
That's the low. That is the all-time low right there.
yeah.
I had on ESPN and NFL Network on all day as I was working, and everyone was laughing at the Bears. That was the lead story. Dalton to the Bears, and pardon the interruption, and around the horn, all those shows. They were just laughing at our expense, and they're part of the problem. They were the ones saying, the Bears need to go out, and they created this monster thinking with Bears fans. But back to the safety position, there are a couple of players that I would like the Bears to consider if they can't bring back Gibson. Trey Boston, who for some reason seems to be a free agent almost every year. He's 29 years old. He's coming off a really good season last season, as he does every year. He was the leader in tackles for his team last year. He started every game. He was with the Cardinals. Anthony Harris, who when he was with the Vikings, played outstanding football. He might be a little bit too expensive. He's probably the top-ranked safety out there. And then another interesting name is Keanu Neal, who missed a couple of seasons because of injury, but came back last season and played fairly well. He's only 25 years old, so if the Bears are thinking about perhaps a long-term solution, and they may want to kick the tires on Keanu Neal. But I'm with Alyssa. I'd love to bring Gibson back. I really fell in love with him, and I think he's a locker room leader as well.
All right, guys. The last thing that it's kind of silly to talk about right now, but prospects for the 2021 season.
I'm gonna need to switch to alcohol for this one.
Yeah. Whatever you want to say, go ahead. If anyone feels like jumping in, go for it.
Go ahead, Alyssa.
I have no prospects for the 2021 season. I'm afraid it's going to be worse than what it was last year. And I know that they made the playoffs and everything, but it could get worse with the situation that they're in. I mean, last year I tried to convince myself with the defense and the moves that they had made with like Robert Quinn and all of that, maybe the defense was just going to get back to his 2018 self. And we saw what the Bears could do with that defense. This year, I know I'm excited to see what Sean Desai can do, but I'm like less enthused about the defense and more focused on just the issues at quarterback and at the management level. I mean, I don't really have any expectations. I'm kind of just already dreading it, and in a weird way. But and I saw one of the commentators mention it kind of feels like, or I know John, you also mentioned that it feels like next year is going to be a lost year, a wasted year that we're going to have to sit through and it feels like everything that should have happened this offseason in January, cleaning house, that we're going to have to endure another season and then we get to that point. Or maybe we don't get to that point and then it just goes on and on and on. So, I mean, in terms of 2021, I don't have really any expectations. I'm hoping, though, if they do have another failure of a season, that this time, please don't sneak into the playoffs. Please have less wins so we can get a higher draft.
I don't know if you guys are hearing an echo. I'm being told.
Yeah, not from you, but from us for sure.
Okay. Well, then let me work on that. But first, I'll share with you my thoughts as I'm working. I'll multitask. You know what? I'm going to be the optimist here and say that under Andy Dalton, this team is going to have a much more efficient offense, and that Matt Nagy has learned from his mistakes, and that the additional changes that they've made with the coaching staff are going to ground him. The defense is going to return to a semblance of 2018, and I really do think that they're going to play better in 2021 than they did in 2020. But whether they're going to have a better record, that I don't know, because that schedule is so tough. John?
Yeah, I think everyone knows my thoughts on the Chicago Bears and their prospects for the 2021 season. I have no confidence in this organization. I can't say any more plainly than that. I have no confidence in the ownership. I have no confidence in the front office, Ted Phillips, Matt Nagy, Ryan Pace, you name it. I have no confidence in them. And am frustrated because, like I said before, I think a lot of Bears fans, and myself included, already feel bad about next season, and it's only March. A lot of the times when you're rebuilding, you think, okay, we're tearing it down, but you know what? We're gonna rebuild, and this is gonna be the first of our building block year, and this is the first step in a new direction. So you're excited about seeing what you can put together in the first year, building onto the second year. This is different because the Bears are apparently in win now mode. They told you they're in win now mode. They retained the head coach. They retained the general manager. They said they have to see progress. They said they need to see improvement. They bring back the whole band. They're bringing it all back other than the quarterback position, which they filled with Andy Dalton. So this team is kind of in that weird, like, we're going to win now when no one expects them to win now. And we just feel like we're pushing off the inevitable. It just feels like we're pushing off this rebuild for one more year because we really just want to get Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace, one more shot at it, or maybe they don't want to pay out their contracts or whatever it is. I don't know if they're that cheap as far as trying to skimp on their contracts, but it just feels like they just said, okay, let's just put it on autopilot. Let's just put it on cruise control for one more year, and then we'll get the business in 2022. I don't want to waste seasons like that. We only get so many Bears seasons in a lifetime, and I'm not trying to get, incredibly philosophical here. I'm not trying to, bring in my own mortality to this or anything. But at the same time, there are Bears fans that are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s that don't want to wait 4 or 5 years. And if they're going to rebuild, they want to rebuild now, and so they want to see it in 2 or 3 years instead of saying, well, let's just go have this, run of the mill season, and then whatever happens, we'll rebuild after that. I don't want that. I'm only in my early 30s, and I don't want that. Alyssa, you're younger than that. You don't want that. Aldo, you were around whenever the Bears were first created. You don't want to see that. You've seen all 100 years in your scope. You don't want to see that happen again. So I just think that there's just this elevated level. Bears fans in general are frustrated, and they're constantly frustrated. And why shouldn't they be? I just feel like right now there's an elevated level of frustration because you don't feel very good going into next year. You don't feel good because at least whenever it was John Fox's lame duck year, they kind of had Trubisky to look at and be like, okay, this kid could be the future. That's cool. We'll see what that happens there. Now, I don't know, and no one knows. And I think just people are very tired and fed up with the same old crap that the Chicago Bears expect us just to accept. And we do, because we love the team. We love the franchise. We're going to watch the games. We're going to be there, and we're going to do this show every week. We're going to do the post-game show. We're going to write stories about the Bears. We're going to cheer for the Bears. We're going to buy Bears gear. And maybe we're the fools in that, and the McCaskies understand that. Maybe they understand that it's just a family business that happens to have a football team. And so they're that's just kind of an afterthought, or maybe it's not a priority. But at the same time, I just think there's an elevated level of frustration within the fan base, and rightfully so. Be pissed off. You don't have to be a blind fan. You don't have to go along with everything that the organization does and say, man, I love that Andy Dalton. Oh, man, I love what Ryan Pace is doing. Oh, man, I'm behind him 100%. If they did it, it's the right move. If they made this decision, it's the right move. No. They've never. If we were in New England, I'd say, okay, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's give Bill the benefit of the doubt with all this spending that the Patriots are doing in free agency. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt and see what he can do there. Why would we ever give the benefit of the doubt to anyone in the Bears organization? What have they given you to give them the benefit of the doubt? What have they ever delivered that has been tangible enough for you to say, I trust them. I trust what they're doing? What track record are we going back and looking over and say, they're going to make the right move? Don't worry, they'll get it right. When have they ever done that? Never. So I'm not trying to be doom and gloom, and I know Aldo and Alyssa are a little more positive than I am about it, but I'm tired of it. I've said this for months. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of trying to figure out this organization, and I want it to love me as much as I love it, just once. And so I hope that they get it right. But I guess that's going to close out this show. I didn't mean to end it on such a negative note, but that's the life and time I guess it is on brand. But before we close things down, let's talk about something happy. And before we close things down, I want to take an opportunity to talk about the other show that Alyssa and I host right here on the Barroom Network called Pass the Mic, a show all about empowering female voices in sports and sports media. We've had some incredible guests across numerous mediums and across numerous professions, and it's just been a really fun ride to talk to female broadcasters, to female professionals who used to play sports, and they talk about how sports shaped their professional careers, talking to current female athletes who are trying to parlay that into a broadcasting career, all of the struggles they've gone through, a lot of the BS and harassment they've gone through and how they overcome that. It's just been a very rewarding experience. And Alyssa, I think you would agree, it's also been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. It's been amazing to talk to so many different women, because we have quite a library of, episodes that we've done, and they're all different. They all have their own unique story, and we come away from these episodes, I feel like, John, we're learning something new, right?
Absolutely.
And, from, these episodes, it shines a light on some of the issues that, for example, I still experience, harassment here and being a woman in sports. So, listening to their stories, it's important to bring that to light, because some people might not be aware that it's happening, but it's just as important to celebrate them and what they've accomplished, which is also what we do. It's not all just, focusing on the bad. We're also taking a look at the good and the accomplishments that they made. And it's just been, like you said, a really rewarding experience getting to talk to so many different women. And, it's always the highlight of my week when we're doing it.
Absolutely. And please share it with your friends, give it a listen, and go back to listen to the entire library, because they're evergreen and they're all unique stories. And you can go back and listen from episode 1 all the way up to, I don't remember how many episodes we've done now, up to 11 or 12, I think now. So go back and listen to them all, because they're all unique and they all have a very good message. That's Pass the Mic right here on the Barroom Network.
And let me add that the best way to stay informed about all of the great things happening at the Barroom is to follow the Barroom's Twitter account at Bears Barroom. And why not? Give me a follow too, at Alyssa Barbieri, and John is at JD Buffone. And by the way, I'm the managing editor over at BearsWire.com, and we've got plenty of the latest Bears news over there. I've written about Andy Dalton way more than I would care to over the last 2 days, so make sure you check out BearsWire.com.
Yeah, you are churning articles out left and right. I don't know how you do it. You're going to have carpal tunnel before the end of the week. So just try to keep yourself healthy over there. But before we head out, a quick programming note for this show. We'll be back monthly throughout the off season. We're going to have a pre and post draft show, so we can talk about what the Bears should do and then complain about the Bears whenever they don't do what we wanted them to do. And then we can really start breaking down what this 2021 roster is going to look like. So I just want to thank everyone that tuned in to the live version of this show, and all of you catching us on the on-demand episode of this afterwards. We're on YouTube. We're on all the audio podcast platforms that you can think of. All you got to do is type us in with Barroom Network. We're going to pop up. But until next time, for Alyssa Barbieri, Aldo Gandia, I'm John Buffone. We'll catch you next time.